Hi, I'm Sarah Shea.
And I'm Strangely Duesberg.
Welcome to the Pilot House.
A podcast where we watch all the shows we missed the first time around.
And try to figure out where the heck they were going with this. Because you're wondering why I've asked you here today, strangely.
It is odd that you decided to meet me here at this strange motel in Twin Peaks, Washington.
You know that doesn't actually exist, right?
What's that? It doesn't exist?
I mean, there's a town there, but it's not called Twin Peaks.
Well, yeah, what is the... I've been to the cafe.
I can't remember. Yeah, it's Tweety's or something like that is
Yeah.
the name of the real cafe. Anyway, this is not why we're here, strangely. We haven't watched Twin Peaks, and we never will.
Why are we here?
Okay.
We are here because we're doing the season finale of season 5
Yes.
of Pilot House.
That's correct. Our Nick at Night season is fully released. You have heard all of the Nick at Night there is to hear, and it's too hot in this room for me to think super clearly, so this is going to be a fun episode. But you guys know we normally get together and talk about each show that we covered in the previous season and whether we picked it up for syndication. And then we talk a little bit about the future of the podcast. This time it's going to be a little different because due to pandemic stuff and also life stuff, we watched all of that season in like a couple of days and recorded all of that season in a couple of days, which sort of messes with your watching ability. Any show you're super stoked to watch more of, if you watch another one later that you're also stoked to watch more of, you're not going to do both. And I think it had the effect for both of us of making us not actually end up watching any of them.
Yeah, we maybe while we were hanging out watch one more episode of something that night?
We watched 2 more episodes of Batman, which is
That's
really
right.
one more episode because they're two-parters. Because we happened to watch Batman last that day, and pizza had just arrived, I think, and we were like, also we were stoked to see more. Just to bathe ourselves in that universe. So Batman does get the special distinction of being the only show from this season that we really did just have to watch one more episode. But I think there were a few others that we said, I'm stoked to watch more of this, let's go do it right now. But then we had to record one more episode, and then it ran too late, and then we were kind of tired or whatever. We didn't want to.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that I didn't go back to any of these, but that kind of leads into, I guess, kind of an overarching feeling I had about this season, and something that something that I've thought about from the shows we watched this season quite a bit since we recorded, is that I miss, and this is something I've said on Pilot House before, I miss television being a 30-minute or a 60-minute block of time where you get a story and then you're done. And you don't have to watch 9 hours to really understand it.
Yeah.
You don't have to have seen every spin-off with characters you don't even care about just to know who that guy is who showed up during the credits or whatever. It's just a 55 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever story.
Yeah. And
it has a beginning, a middle, and end. People grow, people learn things, people change, and then they all get in the ship and fly away, or they're all heading down the road, or, da-da-da-dun, and we're done, and we're out. And, I think that is something that is a recurring theme with all of these shows that we watched, even though I know, vaguely that some of them had growth over time. But they were all created with the idea being that they would just give you a chunk that week of nice time. You would just have a time. Yeah. It was a thing to watch. And I've been thinking about that a lot because I really enjoyed the new Star Trek show, Strange New Worlds. That actually it's built on that formula. There's no overarching plot about the universe or solving some big mystery or anything like that. It's entirely planet of the week. Yeah. We show up, we have a problem.
The ship comes to a planet or someone comes to the ship, a problem happens, the problem is solved. Move on. Yeah,
and just realizing that there are so few pieces of media created with that kind of mentality anymore, that everything has to be this big sprawling whatever. Even novels, so many novels are book 1 in the Traitor Raven trilogy or whatever. It's just I just want a beginning, middle, and end. And thinking back to all of these pilots, when we initially started Pilot House, it was we'll speculate about where the show's going to go in the future, or future season cliffhangers or whatever. And it's almost none of these shows give us anything to work with, because it's just it will be more of these people in roughly this situation for eternity. And especially poor Gilligan. But like, I kind of like that. That's kind of something that I feel like a lot of older television pre-1990 had.
Yeah.
And kind of a thing that I think drew us both to do this podcast in the first place. And to have a whole season of shows that all felt like that. Like, I feel like I could watch episode 50 of any of these shows and be relatively oriented already.
Yeah. And
good to go. And I know that's me repeating a thing that I say a lot on this show, but like, to really get a chance to sink into that kind of thing. I always say I want that when we're watching shows that don't have it. And so to get to watch a bunch of shows that do have it was really, really nice.
Yeah. I think of all of the themes we've done,
mm-hmm.
this was the one that was the most samey in terms of the actual content we were watching.
Yeah.
Because like the season where we watched a different show from every decade was by nature forced us to watch a bunch of very different types of shows.
Yeah.
These shows were all from roughly the same time period. And that, in and of itself, says something about the kind of show. They were still very different genres. I mean, Dragnet is very different from the Addams Family. But they are both from the 60s. So there were rules about TV at that time
mm-hmm.
that are different from what they are now, you know. So having those same rules applied to every show
mm-hmm.
affected our feeling about the overall season,
mm-hmm.
and it made it harder for each individual show to stand out quite so much in our minds. I think that's part of why we weren't drawn to pick any of them up.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it did almost feel like we watched 8 episodes of one thing.
Yeah.
Like, there were a lot of commonalities just in terms of sort of...
I mean, certainly, like, Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie, you know.
Right.
We kind of walked into that one by watching 2 shows, one of which was based on the other, basically. But those 2, and then also Gilligan, had a similar level of, like, shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I'd say, like, Dragnet was kind of the outlier of being the most different.
I mean, yeah.
Well, it was the only one that wasn't a comedy.
And Dick Van Dyke were the 2 outliers for me.
Yeah.
For different reasons.
But then Dragnet is the outlier even on top of that, because Dick Van Dyke was still a comedy, right? Am I wrong? Was that the only show we watched that was not a sitcom? Do I need to like pull up the season?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Other than the scuttlebutt
mm-hmm.
about theme songs, like Dragnet was the only episode about a show that was not a comedy, and I think that was part of what made it really. I think we both felt really like, this is so refreshing and like interesting and different, because it felt different from modern TV, but also very different from everything else we'd watched for the season.
Yeah, as a cultural artifact, Dragnet was so compelling.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do still think about that. I've described that episode to a couple people, like just like having a drink, because it's like, it's such an odd little slice of time where it's kind of that weird. It's that weird time period that in some ways actually there's this commonality with the first episode of Batman where he goes to the club and gets dosed with some sort of drug and is like tripping out and dancing all weird. There was that weird...
Oh no, that, for the record, that was just him dancing. That is not the fault of the drugs.
Right.
He passes out as a result. I just don't want you to let Adam West off the hook.
For the dancing.
That dancing was supposed to actually look cool.
Well, no, I mean, sure. But I guess what I'm getting at is like there was kind of this interesting period of stuff being made around that time where you had the counterculture kind of hippie culture, everything rising up, and then you had sort of establishment culture interacting with it or looking at it or commenting on it. And so like with Dragnet, it's like you have these cop characters who we learned later were like created in an entirely different era that then got ported to TV later. And it's sort of like having them then regarding the youth of the 60s. Yeah. Or like with the case of Batman where it's like he goes into this club and clearly he's like having a weird time. Like it's a weird experience for him even before the drugs. Yeah. I guess I should clarify. Thank you for reminding me of that.
He is sort of a straight-laced citizen. Yeah. In a lot of ways.
But that was such an interesting cultural artifact to look at because it's sort of like the difference between a modern show where you have like a bunch of, trans queer character youth, something like, I've not watched it, but I've heard things about like Euphoria or something like that, where it's like sort of centering those kind of stories versus a more established show like the Roseanne and now Connors reboot where they have the kid who's like some form of, gender expression, you know, the kid
I
is
haven't
like,
watched it. I was never a fan of the show.
yeah,
So
I'm not
checked
either,
it out.
but it's sort of like, it's a more establishment thing. And then
Yeah.
they're like, oh, we should explore some of this.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what if we give them a kid who I think is like a little boy, but wears dresses or something. And it's like, you know, it's just like that feels more like what was going on in Dragnet, where it's like sort of like kind of, you know, the old guard being like, we recognize that there's young, weird creativity coming up and we should engage with it somehow.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's kind of like that interesting transitional period is really, it's a weird thing to look at. Because if that show had been made 10 years later, I don't think it would have been like a Joseph Conrad style Heart of Darkness journey for Thursday, Wednesday? What day of the week? Friday. For Friday and
Harry Morgan. I can't remember.
Yeah. The other
I can't
one.
remember the other one's name.
To go into
Yeah.
the drug culture.
Yeah.
It would have been
Yeah.
a very different story.
That made so much more sense once I found out that, not that I questioned it at the time, but I understood it even more when I realized, oh, this was actually the return of an older show.
Right.
It was them being like, yeah, we're going to be tackling today's issues.
Right.
This might be an old idea, and it might be an old premise and an old character,
Right.
but like, we're going to be getting into it, fam.
Right.
LSD is the wave of the future for drugs.
Oh, man.
But yeah, that also, I think, one of the interesting things about that show is that I said earlier that it was very different from modern TV, but at the same time, I can absolutely see how this was a predecessor to, like, your Law and Orders,
Oh, yeah.
your CSIs. Like, I can see this as being kind of the trendsetter, blazing the trail.
Yeah, well, because there was that scene in it where they go to the crime lab or whatever, and the guy is doing like they have like the chemist or whoever, and he like, there's like slightly more chemistry than one would expect for the plot.
Right,
Like it's
yeah.
unnecessary
Yeah.
for the plot to have that hard. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, Neil Stephenson, sit down. But
But it's like, that was the vibe of that
Yeah.
show. We're going to show you how it actually happens.
Right.
Like, we're going to give you extra details. Like, most shows would have never thought to be like, it was this time we left the office. At this time we arrived. You know, you never thought you needed that, but it was like, it was that verisimilitude that they were going for, where they're like, we're going to tell you how real cops actually do real investigations. And whether it was accurate or not is a question for someone else who knows more about that time period. But that's clearly what they were aiming for.
yeah, I mean, that traces all the way up to something like we watched last season, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where I think they had the times. They had like a location and time on there.
On the
You know,
screen, yeah.
It's kind of like, I'm sure it happened before Dragnet, but it's sort of like this ongoing tradition of having those details.
From what I've read about it, my impression is that Dragnet really set that standard.
Yeah.
Dragnet was the first I mean, and remember that Dragnet started as a radio show in like the 40s.
Right.
Prior to that, crime stories were always very sensational. That's my understanding. So
yeah.
they were really the first ones to be like, but what if we tried to actually tell stories about real crimes that happen to real people and how real detectives really investigate them, instead of it being like, you know, vigilantes and exciting like mobster shootouts and stuff. So anyway, we didn't come here to talk exclusively about Dragnet.
But I do think it sort of points to sort of this larger experience that we did have with these shows, where they were made in this, you know, sort of looking at them as a whole.
Yeah.
They all kind of got made in this time of transition where there were things being explored on them that were possibly not necessarily portrayed on television before, or being shown in front of a wider audience. Like, I Dream of Jeannie.
Yeah.
Comes up with a situation where you have an unmarried man and woman,
Yeah.
like cohabitating.
Yeah.
And even like going into the bedroom together at the end of the episode. I mean, granted, she turns into a puff of smoke, goes under the door, but
still very risque.
And you know, it's like
in a time period where, as far as I know, even then it was still. It could have been very briefly before that, or it could have still been happening. But the tradition of showing married couples with like twin beds in their bedroom, because like you could not imply that even a married couple was sharing a bed.
Yeah.
Like that was either in very recent history at that point, or it was still happening. And so yeah, to even imply that two, you know, unmarried people were like in a bedroom together for any length of time seems like, oh my, very risque. If we can't show her belly button, we're at least going to show her going into the bedroom with him.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just like sort of watching people tiptoe around that or sort of figure out what they could and couldn't do with things like that.
Yeah.
You know, again, so now the Addams Family, you know, I'm not the first one to notice, nor the 1,000th one to notice. Like that whole thing where because Gomez and Morticia are technically doing everything opposite day, you can have a married couple be super affectionate and all into each other on TV. Because the joke is, haha, this is the opposite day.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, though, actually, about that? This is something that didn't come up on either of the episodes, and I don't know why. It seemed really obvious to me when I was editing. Like, why didn't we talk about this? Was that's what I've always heard people say, is that, one of the weird things about the Addams Family is that this married couple are actually affectionate and in love with each other. And I went, I've seen enough sitcoms, even to this day, about married couples who do not seem to like each other all that much. So that math checked out. But then you have the Dick Van Dyke Show with a married couple who are very affectionate and physically affectionate.
Yep.
Like, in the parlance of our times, they fuck.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I remember thinking, like, oh, wow, that's... Because this was maybe even before?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the exact years of either pilot, but if it wasn't before Addams Family, they were right around the same time.
Right.
So I wonder how that was received. If it was on the Addams Family, it was received as another sign that this is a weird, unusual couple. Mm-hmm. Like, how is it received on Dick Van Dyke, where they're not the 100% cliche couple because he has a slightly unusual job writing for television. As far as jobs that are depicted on TV at the time, anyway. He doesn't work at a factory or in just any old office. But other than that, they're pretty conventional. She's a stay-at-home mom. They have one kid. Mm-hmm. You know, she was wearing pants, which I did see someone say on the internet that, like, her pedal pushers were like a revelation for a stay-at-home mom on TV to be wearing pants around the house.
Whoa.
I was like, whoa. But yeah, she's still a stay-at-home mom. The entire first episode, the main thrust of the episode is women's intuition, and I'm worried about my son who might be sick, and the over-concerned mom, and the dad being like, you're overthinking it, honey. But so in a lot of ways, they were very conventional. But then, yeah, this whole, like, man, those last 5 seconds are hot.
Yeah.
When she takes off the necklace, like, goddamn.
It's funny because, like, even though I didn't pick up the show, I did go and read Dick Van Dyke's memoir.
Oh.
The title of which has completely escaped me, but it's
funny.
It's so funny. Like, he
seems like he'd be delightful.
He's of a somewhat concurrent era with Steve Martin, and there's a lot of similarities between how he writes and Born Standing Up, Steve Martin's book, about kind of a similar era of show business. Similar struggles, like a kind of a similar arc. But he talked about working on the Dick Van Dyke Show with Carl Reiner and how there were things in it that they thought they weren't going to get away with, but then they did. And a key element to it was that the relationship with Mary Tyler Moore felt so real that most audiences, and again, this is Dick Van Dyke's like kind of winky.
Remember, it's a memoir, not a citations galore required with a memoir. But.
His impression of why they got away with these things, some of the stuff, was that people really thought he and Mary were married because the on-screen chemistry and just their ease with each other was so believable.
Oh, that's sweet.
It was like you could almost get away with some stuff because it's like, well, you know, leave them alone. That's Whereas, like a lot of other sort of television shows, there was maybe the fiction. I think it's because he was playing a guy.
Yeah.
You know, like it's hard. It's like it was supposedly closer to him.
Yeah.
And so people just assumed it was more real. And
even though the character is not him, the character is a writer, not a performer. And, well, I mean, he's a performer, but the character is not named Dick Van Dyke, but because it was called the Dick Van Dyke Show, somehow they were like, well, this is what he's really like.
Yeah, I mean, it's not super relevant to anything, but I loved the idea that at least in his telling of the story, that's how they got away with stuff.
It is interesting to hear that they were consciously pushing boundaries at the time.
Yeah.
To have that confirmed, because I would
Yeah.
assume they would have to. Like, that little bit with her taking off the necklace,
Oh, yeah.
that's very suggestive, especially if it feels like for the time period to be like, damn, like, that's... I'm pretty sure that's before I Dream of Jeannie.
Yeah.
And I Dream of Jeannie, even though they did show them, in the bedroom, like we said, but, like, still, you couldn't show her belly button on
Right.
screen. Like, still, there were restrictions about... And you never see the inside of the bedroom, at least not in that first episode, so...
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I don't know, it's, it is interesting to have it confirmed that they were pushing the boat out of it there.
Yeah. You don't see the inside of the bedroom, but there is a chaperone in there, so it's all above
Oh,
board.
it's fine, yeah.
One last
Little
little
old lady in the corner sitting in a chair just knitting.
one last little tidbit about Dick Van Dyke, the Dick Van Dyke Show. He apparently, on a couple of occasions, got confronted when he was out for dinner with his wife that he was, like, stepping out on Mary Tyler Moore.
Oh my god, that's amazing. The idea that people were, so convinced that he was really married to her.
Yeah.
One of those little electric bikes just went by. We should have said this at the top of the episode, that we are in the middle of a heat wave in not even August, end of July when we were recording this. So it's, you're looking at your watch to see if it was August.
Well, it's 7.5 hours to August. We're getting close.
Yeah. So we're in the middle of a heat wave at the end of July. It is like over 90 degrees in Seattle, which is unusual. And so we do have the window open because it's very hot in here, even so, without any fans or anything on. So yeah, if there's some weird noises or you hear some crows cawing in the tree outside my window, I'm sorry, but deal with it. Anyway, what were we saying about Mary Tyler Moore? Oh, the idea that people were so convinced that he was actually married to Mary Tyler Moore that when they saw him out with another woman, they didn't go, "Oh, is he not married to Mary Tyler Moore? I thought he was. He's stepping out on her, or is that his real life?" They didn't even think. They were so convinced that they were like, "I'm going to go tell that guy. Give the guy a piece of my mind."
Yeah.
And that they thought, it's important for me to walk up to this famous person in a restaurant and call him out. Like, amazing.
Well, I mean, part of it is the distance of years, but a few of these shows, I just remember sitting there watching them, just feeling like, this is so wholesome.
Yeah.
And that one was, I think, the pinnacle of that, of all the shows we watched, that, like, it just has this feeling of, like, when people are like, back in the good old days, or, back when people were better, or whatever, like, when people get nostalgic for the past, I know that it's a fantasy, but I've very rarely seen the fantasy as strong as I can see it in this, where I'm like, okay, this is your vague memory.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you hear folks older than us talk about vague memories of, like, it used to be like this, and Walter Cronkite would tell you the news, or whatever. And I'm like, when? Literally when? And, like, that is actually this artifact, the Dick Van Dyke Show is like, okay, that's a when.
Yeah.
That's a when we can specifically point to and find things in. It's like, oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, Carl. Right. Okay. Well, I think we should address I was going to say the elephant in the room, but it might be more appropriate to say we should address the bear in the room. Because we also did watch a show with a bear this season. And I just thought we should sort of talk about that moment when this podcast lost its way and went into a tailspin.
Oh! I was like, we watched a show with a bear? I was racking my brain to think of a scene in any of these Nick at Night shows or Ted Lasso that had a bear in them. I had already forgotten, because Tailspin was not technically part of season 5, except that it came out exactly 2 weeks before the beginning of season 5. So, yes, we temporarily on April 1st forgot what our show was about. And I did question later. I was like, why did we decide the funny joke would be we forgot what our show was about, not, hey, everybody, we're pivoting to a new topic. We're changing what our show is about. That seems like the more obvious joke than we forgot for a minute that our show wasn't about violence. Sometimes I wonder how our brains work, strangely.
By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
No. But it was fun.
It was fun.
I genuinely enjoyed watching that with you.
That is such a good memory. That's a top tier memory of working on this podcast. Yeah. Just because that was something that upon revisit, it was both like chintzier than I remember. It's just like a lower quality product.
Worse and also better.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly had no memory. I'm sure I did never see this, but like the fact that it was shot like it was made as if it was like a feature length film, just like kind of like our direct to video. But apparently, I think it was actually shown in some theaters, but kind of as like a promotional thing for the show more than it was like, this is a real movie.
What and it's so weird because like some of the paintings and the matte paintings and backgrounds and things are really high quality. Like there is some gorgeous work on display, and then there's also the giant lightning laser thing that is just like a ball on the end of a stick.
Yeah, well, and also the incredibly forgettable songs. Which I found out, I think unfortunately after we recorded the podcast, I found out that the all those forgettable songs, including an entire extra one that was edited out. It was shown in the theatrical version and edited out for the TV show. And when I stumbled across it online, I legitimately sat there going, was this edited out or did I just forget it because it's deeply boring and forgettable? And I was pretty sure. Then I found confirmation somewhere that it was edited out. And I was like, I think we watched the TV version.
Right.
But anyway, those songs were all written by the same songwriting. It was a married duo that wrote the theme song, which is a unimpeachable banger. Yeah. And they also wrote the Gummy Bears theme song, which is also pretty damn good. I'm like, they must have been rushed. That's the only explanation I could think of for it. Maybe they were going through something and they were rushed. It seems like there has to be two elements to explain why all the songs in that are not just forgettable, but kind of bad.
My theory is that they got hired to write the theme song, and then late in production, it was like, oh, we need 3 more musical numbers.
Maybe.
Because I can't remember. I'm now drawing a blank, but Tailspin originally began life as they were developing a spin-off or a sequel or something to something else, and then they mushed it up with Jungle Book. It was like a...
I don't remember this, but it sounds feasible.
It's sort of like Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers was originally... it was meant to be more of the Rescuers.
Oh, wow, that explains so much.
Yeah.
That would make so much more sense than Chip 'n Dale. I mean, it wasn't a problem. I think that was a great show. I loved it as a kid, and I still have very fond memories of it now, even though I have no interest in watching the new movie. But, yeah, the idea of, okay, Chip and Dale are just 2 lovable scamps who do not wear clothes and make life hell for Donald Duck, somehow being like, now they're adventurers. Like, it's just as confusing as a bunch of jungle animals teaching a human boy how to live in India. Yeah. Suddenly they're in the Caribbean in the 40s and they're doing an adventure serial. Yeah. It's like just as how did we get here?
Yeah. It's bothering me that I'm drawing a blank on what the original sort of pitch was, but it was one of those things where they had a thing and another thing and then they just kind of now kiss
the them. The thing it's reminding me of is I might be remembering this incorrectly, and I apologize if anyone knows the truth about this, but it is a true fact that the same songwriting duo as 2 brothers, the Sherman Brothers, I think is their name, wrote the music for Disney's Mary Poppins and also Bedknobs and Broomsticks. Right. And I feel like I heard a thing at one point where they had started working on Mary Poppins, and then the author of Mary Poppins there started being issues.
Right.
I know that it's also a fact that there were issues with her and Disney, and they made a whole movie about it with Tom Hanks, who made Disney seem like a great guy because he's Tom Hanks. But I believe that caused a delay in the production of Mary Poppins, but Disney had the Sherman Brothers on retainer, and they went, well, we've got this other book that we're thinking about making a movie for, so here's this book. Maybe write some songs for that. And if you watch those 2 movies back to back, the songs do seem like some of them could have been interchangeable.
Right.
And there's maybe some truth that, like, some of the songs were supposed to be for one movie and got moved to the other or something like that.
Well, definitely the I Love to Laugh thing. I love
Yeah.
to laugh where they're like floating up to the ceiling.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with what's happening in the... It could have been in any live-action Disney movie,
Right.
pretty much.
And that also seems much more at home in a film called Bedknobs and Broomsticks than in Mary Poppins.
And also the one in Bedknobs and Broomsticks, the bobbing along at the bottom of the beautiful briny sea, where they're suddenly like dancing with fish. That could have just as easily been one of the dream sequences in Mary Poppins.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, both films have a lot of live action and animation together. Bedknobs and Broomsticks even more so.
Right.
But yeah,
I have to.
they also both contain. Oh, what's his name? The actor who plays the dad in Mary Poppins is also the adult lead in Bedknobs and Broomsticks. What's his name? Except he's a much more likable guy. He's like the dad from Mary Poppins. If he had like a younger brother who was like the black sheep of the family, and his existence is part of why the dad is such a like stiff upper lip guy in the beginning of the movie. That's the character he plays in Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
Okay, so I had to look up the Tailspin pitch thing because I just remember it being convoluted and kind of weird. So here's the quick cliff notes.
Yeah.
I encourage you to go down the Wikipedia rabbit hole about this, but essentially Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 81, 82, something like that. And the following year, a show called Tales of the Golden Monkey, or Tales of the Gold Monkey was released. That was like an adventure serial, basically kind of trying to do the same thing.
Right.
Disney was trying to develop an animated adventure show, and they had 4 different production teams under 4 different producers who were kind of all supposed to be pitching adventure shows.
Yeah.
And one team was basically trying to do an animated Tales of the Gold Monkey because that show is about an air cargo service kind of thing.
Yeah.
They were also inspired by Porco Rosso, the Miyazaki movie, which if you think about the world of Tailspin,
that is one I've still never seen, but I at least know the brief.
Yeah, it's like very similar kind of animation style, float planes, all that kind of stuff. And so they're like, oh, we kind of make a Porco Rosso thing. And then The Jungle Book was theatrically re-released for its 30th anniversary. And they're like, let's just put like, because they couldn't crack what characters to use. And they're like, oh, Jungle Book, that's hot right now. Let's use them. So it was kind of
use the momentum of people remembering that they like The Jungle Book and a new generation being introduced to it. Yeah.
And so it's just kind of a weird pitch where it's like, we're trying to make an animated Indiana Jones-ish show that's a 1930s throwback that is part of like the second wave of 30s nostalgia, 20s, 30s serial nostalgia, because there was like the 50s revival and then 30 years later the 80s revival of that, like those 30-year cycles. And you know what, let's combine a nostalgia thing from 60 years ago with a nostalgia thing from 30 years ago as they both come around in the the thing. It's really, really fascinating how
honestly
that works.
that explains everything. Like I had a feeling as a kid, obviously I never questioned it. You don't question those things when you're a kid.
No, that is just
like,
the world.
That's just this show, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
But as an adult looking at it and going, hey, that was a weird combination of things. How did that come together? That is a perfectly, like, this thing was popular at the time, so they were trying to rip it off, and they had this other property that was experiencing revival, and they went,
So
it's a perfectly cromulent explanation.
Are you ready for one more the one more piece of that puzzle?
Oh, please.
So you know how the show is about kind of a lovable doofus who owns a business, but he doesn't really have a head for
business.
You know what the most popular show on television was at the time? We've watched the first episode of it.
Oh, tell me.
Cheers. So, the reason that
we have not watched that. You watched it on your own.
We didn't watch it.
We did not.
Oh my god! I talk about Cheers with you so much. I just figured we'd watched it together.
We have talked about it on the podcast, but you watched Cheers.
Right. So I've watched like the first couple seasons of Cheers.
Yeah.
And so Ted Danson, he's this lovable doofus. He owns a bar. He's not a bad businessman, but like they throw in the very first episode. I'm totally forgetting her name now. She shows up. Not Kirstie Alley, the one who was there before her.
Oh, I was trying to remember the character name. It's on the tip of my brain. But Shelley...
Diane.
Yes, Diane.
So they bring
Shelley Long.
Shelley
Long and Shelley Duvall. I mix them up all the time. They're both willowy 80s actresses. 70s, 80s.
So
Anyway.
you just brought up Shelley Duvall, and my brain shut down for a second.
I'm sorry.
Okay, and I'm back.
In a good way or a bad
Oh,
way?
the best way.
Okay.
Popeye.
Wow.
All right.
Formative. All right.
Very formative. But so, that all of a sudden, his level doofus, his business, it's like kind of his clubhouse, it's his thing. And then they bring in the strong-willed 80s businesswoman type. As, Diane comes in.
Yeah.
And so the I can't remember her, Rebecca, who comes in and she buys the float plane business and ends up being a part owner, and they're always butting heads, was directly inspired by that from Cheers.
That's amazing.
Because she's the one solid lead who doesn't really have an analog back in the jungle book.
No, she's the only other than the two kid characters who are obviously introduced because there are no children characters.
Right.
You need kids on a kids show, I guess they decided, and there's no kids in the Jungle Book. But I'm sorry. I realized I was going to say, she's the only character. And then no, there's the two kids. And there's the villain.
Right.
Of the two villains, the funny one, the pirate character, he's also not from it. So never mind. But yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. Also, you've got King Louis now runs a bar.
Right.
Fun,
Shere Khan,
cool
Khan
hangout.
Industries.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's like fascinating to sort of to very, very clearly have these things, and these are things that like the creators have talked about in interviews, like they're very open about this, that all this stuff went into a blender, and out came that. You know what,
the funny thing is that all I needed to hear was, anniversary re-release of Jungle Book and Raiders of the Lost Ark very popular, and I went, there you go. The added bit about also they thought maybe we should also take this relationship from Cheers and copy it over. That's just an extra cherry on top of this banana sundae, which is called a banana split. I don't know why I called it a banana sundae. It's not. Anyway, it's not important right now.
Speaking of banana sundaes, you've got me thinking about dessert, which makes me think about cinnamon rolls, which makes me think about the other outlier show that we watched this season.
Now, I'm genuinely amazed at myself that I didn't end up watching more of Ted Lasso.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch even one more?
I didn't.
And you know what? I think I can point to the one exact reason. And it's that it's on a streaming service that I don't have.
Yeah.
Now, could I have asked around and found a friend who was willing to let me use their login? Of course not. We follow the rules, and we are law-abiding citizens. Of course I could, but it was just that one extra step.
Yeah.
And it's pandemic times, and honestly, I have so much screen in my life, even still, after 2.5 goddamn years, that when I watch TV now, it's usually because I want to just, relax and escape, and, I just end up rewatching a lot of old faves, and I mostly watch stuff that me and my roommate are both interested in watching.
Right.
So I don't make a point to watch something just because I found it an interesting show, which is usually in the before times would be why I sought out something and watched it. But, my roommate and I have rewatched the entirety of Leverage twice in the past calendar year. So that's where my head is at.
Well, I've been on a rewatch journey through Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, I have also, but that's been going on for several years. I have starts and stops. Every time Kai Wynn shows up, I lose my will to live or watch the show.
I mean, Pope Karen is hard.
Yeah, she's the fucking worst. People who like her, of the two main villains of that show, people who are like, oh, Kai Wynn is really interesting and complex, and Gul Dukat is, boring. I don't want to talk to those people. When I found out that they existed on the internet, I was so upset. Because I'm on the opposite camp.
I'm so confused as to... I wonder if it's, she was maybe really popular with, there's, a weird conservative Christian bloc that really likes Star Trek. Yeah. I grew up in that community.
I've seen people making memes.
We didn't like her there either.
I've seen people in Star Trek shitposting groups who are posting funny memes referencing the fact that Kai Wynn is an interesting, fun, complex villain, and Gul Dukat is just the worst and should not be talked about. And I'm like, no, it's literally the opposite.
But Gul Dukat is so charming that you're happy to hang out with him until you remember he's literally a Nazi.
Yeah. actual war criminal, Gul Dukat. He's actually a very, 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 very bad person. But Mark Alimo makes him so charming at times. And even when he's charming, it's charming in a way that kind of makes your skin crawl.
Yeah.
He's such an interesting character. But then there's times when you're like, this goofball, love this guy. Oh, he does murders. Right. Sorry, I forgot about the murders for a second. Not a goofball. Okay, moving on. But Kai Wynn shows up and you're just like, this bitch again.
Do we have to watch this episode?
Kai Wynn at it again with the white nonsense. Like, she's just tedious. She just makes me not want to watch the show. And I don't understand people who feel the opposite about those two characters. But this episode is not about Deep Space Nine.
I mean, every episode I spend on any podcast I ever appear on talking about TV, Deep Space Nine goes through my brain at least once.
Fair.
So I'm glad that it was finally externalized on this day.
Anyway, Ted Lasso, though, was delightful.
Yeah.
And I really do want to watch more of it. I want to see more. I want to live in that universe more. I want to see where they go with it and, like, how the characters develop and, like, what you get out of it. Oh, someone did just recently tell me that one of our Cliff's predictions comes true in the second season.
Oh, wow.
But I don't remember what any of them were. And I said, don't tell me which one it is.
Ted Lasso joins the Avengers. Surprise.
I don't remember what any of ours were. Oh, no, I think they said one of the ones we had was, like, really close to being correct. And then one of them was more or less correct, but in season 2 or something like that. And I was like, oh, good. Well done, us. Yeah, I still would like to watch more of that show. It's on Apple Plus or something. And I just... Oh, yeah, I think you mentioned that your parents were getting the Apple Plus for the winter season, and you were totally going to watch it, and then you did not. So what's your excuse?
I ended up not being around as much during the winter season as I thought I was going to be. Because I ended up leaving for the Arctic a lot earlier than I thought I was going to.
That's right. I forgot about that.
And
wait, you didn't watch Ted Lasso while you were having an exciting adventure on a tall ship in the Arctic? You didn't spend your one wild and precious trip to the Arctic watching Ted Lasso?
No, because I had so much Deep Space Nine on my laptop. That was here's a little Arctic story for just the listeners of the podcast where I talk about TV shows. Mm-hmm. I brought season 2 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine with me on the ship, and every night, kind of like in the evening, I would go have a little time to myself and I would read for about an hour, and then I would work on learning Norwegian for about an hour, and then I would watch an episode of Deep Space Nine. I kind of had a little 2.5 hour, 3 hour block of time where I was in the cabin alone, just in my bunk, kind of all cozy and snuggly with like a hot drink. And the first like really hardcore O'Brien Must Suffer Deep Space Nine episode was in that block of episodes that I watched while I was in the Arctic, and I was on a ship far from civilization, no internet, and I like could not talk to anybody about like the emotions I was feeling.
Oh, right, the one with fake O'Brien.
With fake O'Brien, yeah.
Oh, we shouldn't say anything more than that, just because.
Right.
There's no, in Sarah's house, there is no statute of limitations on spoilers that you don't need to talk about. But yeah, like, that is an intense episode. That one's got some frickin' feelings.
Yeah, and it was just like, sort of to like, this character is like questioning the nature of their reality and like kind of all those kind of things, like, and feeling like everyone's turning on you. And it's just like, it was so effective because it was the kind of story you usually get in a standalone movie. Yeah. But the twist came in a story where you're used to Cole Meany being Miles O'Brien for years at this point.
Yeah.
And I had somehow missed that episode in all of my watchings of Deep Space Nine growing up. You know, I've seen most of it.
I had no memory of it when because I watched the show on the air when it was airing for the most part. And, like, I had no memory of that one for sure when I went back to do my grown-up rewatch. And it was, like, heavy.
Yeah.
Heavy.
And so I ended up cornering another member of the expedition like later that evening, and we drank like 3 beers, and I like explained this whole thing and why it was so emotionally like impactful. to someone who had never watched Star Trek Deep Space Nine, or I think any Star Trek, because he grew up in Spain and it wasn't really his thing. And so to just be like, and so then he found out that he wasn't him. And my friend goes, oh, that sounds very dramatic. I can see why you had to talk about it.
Well, that's very, very generous of him to sit and.
Yeah. So I'm glad that I could just mention which episode it was to you, and I'm sure to many of our listeners, and you go, "Oh my God, yes!"
Right. I think the weirdest thing about that episode, honestly, is that it ends on such a weirdly light note with the whole thing about the. Oh no! I'm sorry. I was thinking of a different episode.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the one where the whole thing happens because Keiko says Miles would not be drinking coffee at that time of day. And then in the end, it's like the super intense episode. And then at the end, he's like, oh no, I drink coffee all the time, all day long. And she's like, oh, well.
I thought I knew you, Miles.
Good thing I thought I knew that because I ended up saving your life because I thought you didn't drink coffee or something.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't remember what the main crux was of that episode. Totally different episode. Pardon me.
I mean, O'Brien did have to suffer many times.
Yeah. Look, as long as we're talking about Deep Space Nine, can I just say something?
Yes.
Which is that in all the memes that I see on the internet about Deep Space Nine, people love to refer to Sisko as, like, a space dad.
Uh-huh.
And, like, I understand that he's a dad, but, like, so is O'Brien. And as far as, like, dad stereotypes go, I feel like Miles O'Brien is way more dad than Sisko is. Sisko's, like, a cool dad. Like,
yeah.
O'Brien, look, all this guy wants to do is watch his World War II documentaries and have a beer with his buddy, but the whole damn station won't stop messing with the thermostat. Like, this is his whole life.
Yeah. He's everybody's dad.
He is the cliche dad and a literal dad. And I don't know, it just bothers me. People are like, why does everyone just say space dad? Like, that covers everything. I partially also because when I was a kid watching TNG, I liked to fantasize that Riker and Troy were my parents. So I think of them as like space mom and space dad in a way. And because I love, as flawed as the writing is at times, I still deeply love Keiko and Miles' relationship. So I kind of think of them as space mom and space dad sometimes. But I never think of Sisko as space dad. He's too cool. He's too cool to be space dad.
Yeah, so
he is a dad, but it's incidental. Anyway, moving on.
What we're saying, though, is that Ted Lasso was good. We just didn't have time to watch more of it.
Now that we've talked about Deep Space Nine, Ted Lasso was good.
Well, Sarah, as we're sort of winding down this discussion of season past, why don't we chat for a few minutes about the future of what's going on here?
Speaking of Deep Space Nine, let's talk about the future.
We have some amazing sort of segue points in this episode.
That's been good. That's been good. So we usually finish our season finale with a little bit of an announcement about what is coming in the future and what our plan is. And often we've had at least a rough time of year, if not a specific date, for the next season to begin. And we've known what the theme was going to be, or at least we had an idea of a theme. This time we are ending on a much more uncertain note, partially because Strangely is about to go on another adventure, which will not allow for a lot of podcast recording.
I'm going to be going to a school in Fosen, Norway. I'm going to Fosen Folkeskole, which is near Trondheim.
Oh, sure. Near Trondheim.
Well, I mean, you know, Trondheim being the fifth biggest city in Norway is sort of like me saying I am the world's fifth most famous Goose Corps band. But,
yeah.
But anyway, so I'm going to this school. It's an intensive 9-month program to learn how to build traditional Viking longboats using traditional techniques, and it's all taught in Norwegian, which jeg ikke snakker Norse, so I'm still working on it, but I've got a størst amount of work to do to finish.
Tusen takk.
Nice.
It's like one of the few things I can say.
Bara hyggelig. Hyggelig.
You have to say tusen takk. If you say tusen takk, that means 1,000 roofs.
Yeah, you know.
Can't hold out that A too long. You gotta. I was told you have to kind of bounce it.
Tak.
Tusen takk.
Tusen takk.
That's 1,000 thanks for anyone.
One of my favorite things about sort of everyone knowing that I'm trying to learn Norwegian right now is everyone has like the one thing they know how to say in Norwegian, and my favorite one so far is this like older man that I know through the Bellingham Farmers Market community, and he really wanted me to learn "Snakk du dronninger," which means "listen to the Queen." And it's sort of like a
Please use that whenever someone is not paying attention to you and you need to get their attention.
Listen to the Queen. Snakk du dronninger. It's like Snakka du dronninger. It's like listen to the Queen is like it's like a marital proverb, right? So like husbands like listen to the Queen.
I was thinking it was something about like, you know, just toe the line, follow the rules, like listen to the. But I don't know that Norway has ever had a ruling queen.
I don't know if they've had a queen in her own right as like on her own, but I believe they still have
queen, not just a married to the king queen.
Yeah, right. A queen. A woman king. Yeah. They have not had a woman king.
Right. To differentiate, because like when a queen is married, that person does not get to get called the king. But when the king is married,
yeah. The queen's
but when a king is married, that person is called the queen.
Right.
Because gender.
I know that they still have royals though, because one night I was walking through Oslo and I was very drunk, and I ended up looking at Google Maps and going, I could get there faster if I went in a straight line through this, which looks like a park. And so I hopped a little fence and was sort of walking along, and I passed a large building with pillars and things, and I just sort of kept walking.
Oh, no.
And then a very, very handsome man with a gun came up to me and was like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm walking, going there. And he said, oh, this is restricted at night. It's closed. This is the palace. And I went, oh, and he goes, it's all right. The king is not in residence right now. So you just go there. And he let me go.
I can't believe that the royal palace of Norway has hoppable fences.
So much of Norway has hoppable fences in places where we would have 10-foot high barbed wire because just people just know not to.
I guess so.
Like as soon as he heard me speaking, you know, as soon as he was like, an American, you are basically an illiterate child. I feel bad for you.
Not only in the sense that you can barely speak our language, but also in the sense that you don't know better than to just hop a fence and break a rule.
So anyway, despite my earlier faux pas, I am going back to Norway. Faux pas? Fox's paws? Faux pas?
Yeah, one of those little fox paws.
I'm going back to Norway to learn how to build Viking longboats, and it's this intensive program, so for the most part I won't have reliable internet access, and I'm going to be kind of out there.
You're going to be busy making boats?
That's right. Making boats, sailing boats, dreaming about boats, eating out of little round boats.
Yeah, those little paper trays that are called boats.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a result, and also because of the 8-9 hour time difference.
Yeah, it changes based on daylight savings.
Right. It's going to be difficult or possibly impossible for us to get anything recorded, and because of a very busy schedule for both of us, but especially you preparing for this trip, and on the heels of coming back from your trip to the Arctic, that did not leave us time to do one of our little, what we call a clump night, and record all of a season in one go, and then have them pieced out over time. So we had a chat about what that meant, and we also thought, you know, it has been over 5 years. We've done 5 seasons. And unlike a lot of podcasts where 5 seasons might mean, you know, like a couple hundred episodes or something, we managed over 5 years and 5 seasons to put out 69 episodes up top. Hey. So yeah, it's we thought this would be a good time to sort of revisit and say, how do we feel about the podcast, and what do we want to change anything about the future? So should we talk about what our loose idea is? It's nothing set in stone, but
yeah. And why don't you take the lead on this, because I feel like I did a lot of talking about Tailspin and Wooden Boat School. So you had more concrete ideas about this than I did, but I was very yes Andy, so I'm ready to be your yes Andy.
Yes Andy. So I'm just thinking, because Nick at Night, I'm just imagining somebody watching the Andy Griffith Show at home and just being like, horny for Andy Griffith, being like, yes, Andy. I love a man in uniform. Yes. Nailed it. Anyway, the point is, the loose idea that we have for the future is that this feed and this show and kind of everything that we're doing podcast-wise, the Sarah and Strangely Show, will be pivoting from Pilot House to something that we're tentatively calling Herringbone Audio Presents. The Herringbone Society is a sort of light, loosely named production company, if you like to call it that, of me and Strangely and my brother. I almost said our brother, how adorable. My brother Aaron and my sister Esty. That we have this sort of like, sort of vague. It's the umbrella. It's a parent company of all the stuff that we all make. So in case you always wondered why the podcast always says Pilot House is a Herringbone Society production at the end, and now you know.
That's also why at the end of most episodes of Strangely and Friends, the podcast, I have a similar little thing where I say Strangely and Friends, the podcast is a Herringbone Society production.
Because technically, both Strangely and Friends, the podcast, and Pilot House are both Herringbone audio shows. We've just never actually done anything about that fact. So, the idea is that in the future, in this same feed, so stay subscribed, we will post occasional episodes for a while. That might, whenever, if we are able to make something happen while Strangers and Nori, for example, if we end up thinking of something or whatever, maybe we'll watch another movie. We had a really fun time talking about Jaws last season.
Oh, yeah.
Or in the in-between season.
Mm-hmm.
The October Spooktacular. And we might do like a movie, or we might do we'll pick a topic, like a scuttlebutt type thing, and just like, that would be really fun to talk about. Let's just do that. We have some time. There's a day where both of us can be awake and cognizant at the same time and record this. We might post it up in the feed, but it might not be about television or movies or anything similar. It might be something else. Because the one thing that we've really picked up on from the audience feedback that we've gotten over the last 5-ish years is that the thing that people mainly responded to with this show is our rapport and our personalities, less so like the premise of two people talking about TV, which you can get on a lot of other podcasts.
I mean, yeah, I don't really feel like I have anything particularly great to add to talking about TV, but I feel like I am one of the best in the world at talking with Sarah Shea about literally anything.
Yeah. I feel like I am also, like, of my many skills, one of them is having a good time talking to strangers.
Sarah Shea.
Okay. Fun's fun. You will have your little jokes. All right. But the point is that this feed may in the future theoretically involve straight up episodes of Pilot House, us talking about a show we've never watched before. It could be the two of us talking about something totally different. It could be one of us doing a thing or with another guest. All of this stuff is sort of in the ether. And we hope that once boat school is done, we might have something a little more concrete going on. But honestly, the future is very uncertain for both of us. So that's why we kind of thought of this idea of the Herringbone Society Presents being a somewhat more open concept podcast feed to give us the opportunity to not throw away the idea of having a podcast or our feed or our listeners or our anything, but also not lock ourselves into a thing when we really don't know what life is going to look like for us in the future. So we hope that you guys will stay subscribed to this channel and continue with us on whatever journey we go on.
It's always been a journey, and it continues to be a journey. Looking back over the last 5-ish years of doing this, I remember when I first suggested to you that we do this, and I was just like, I love talking about TV with Sarah Shea, and it's funny that the show that originally motivated me to want to do this whole thing, I still haven't managed to sit you down and make you watch an episode of Earth Final Conflict, but at some point...
What? You told me that White Collar was the show that made you want to do this podcast.
Yes.
That's why that was our first episode.
I'm sorry. You're
I
right.
mean, our zero
So
episode.
White Collar, we watched and did that, but once the premise had been established, the
Yeah.
show, I really wanted to sit you down and be like, you need to watch this Cuckoo Bananas thing.
Well, but at one
We
point...
haven't watched it yet.
But at one point, isn't that the show where you told me you only wanted to talk about it if I liked the show? Isn't that the one? There was one show where you said, I really want to do this for the podcast, but if you end up not liking it, I don't want to talk about it because it'll bum me out. Isn't that the one?
Maybe?
Maybe you were just going through... You're having a moment at that
I was
moment.
having a moment with that show.
Yeah. There was a point where you said, let's not record what we know or whatever, but like, if you want to sit down and watch that show at some point, watch it. And if you end up liking it, then we'll record a discussion about it.
Well, the main point of all of this is that we still haven't managed to record that. So there are still sort of...
I would have watched it sooner if I thought you really wanted to do it.
Well, I'm just realizing, looking back, that's like the one show regret that we just didn't get around to. But we could still do. We still could. And that's the thing is, like, just looking back at all of this, you know, I started doing this because I wanted to make stuff with you. And I still want to make stuff with you. You know, I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking off mic that you are a huge factor in my prose writing because you are often the second reader. You go through and you make sure I spelled my own name correctly and that the commas are in the right places and all of those like proofreading things. But also you give me comments on structure and form and clarity that I think are really huge. And
if you're looking for a freelance copy editor, visit sarahshay.com, email me. I have very reasonable rates.
And very, very useful, helpful comments as well.
Thank you. I'm glad.
So, you know, it's something that, you know, for our listeners who enjoy our comedy and our friendship and all of that, like, those things are still happening. The collaboration is still happening. It's just not exactly this particular thing in this particular capacity, but it's something that we both enjoy.
Yeah.
And we want to find ways to make more of it happen in the future. Speaking of little notes for people listening, if you who are listening to this, or someone you know, is just like really, really, really into editing large 2 gigabyte audio files and taking out all of the weird mouth pops and breath noises and coughs and everything, please get in touch, because we're sort of interested in exploring the idea of hiring somebody to be a producer for us on this, to edit this and also help us get the audio quality kicked up a notch. Yeah.
We've acknowledged that although, you know, we've both learned to do it, and I think learned to do it fairly well, the production aspect of the show is the part that we are least stoked about. If anyone is interested in helping us out in that arena, it would help for there to be more of Pilot House or whatever we make in the future. If someone else is willing to help us out with some of those big old files. Also, listening to our own voices sometimes gets a little tedious. I'm not going to lie. I did absolutely listen to our Hustle Catch-Up the other day just for fun. I did that. I don't hate listening to the sound of my own voice. That's the kind of person I am.
Well,
but
eventually
even for
you get inoculated to it when you've produced 69 nice episodes of this podcast. Like, we have both spent hundreds of hours like editing this show over the years. Yeah. It's out like to have done.
Yeah. So it's even it gets to be quite a lot, and I think we would make more and perhaps more frequently if we had someone to help with that. So we're just putting that one out in the universe.
Speaking of help, one last thing I wanted to talk about while we're sort of recording this.
Still haven't done Columbo. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Just one more thing. Columbo. Oh my god, that would be an amazing...
One more thing. Forget everything we just said. We're starting a Columbo podcast. Columboys, we're coming for you.
No, the gag I was thinking of is like, we're like, so anyway, thanks for listening to Pilot House. Doom, 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 doom. Like, we go out, we do the outro music, everything, and then it's like, just one more thing. And then it's a full episode on Columbo, like, on the end of this.
Yes. Good times.
The one last thing, though, I wanted to say is that if you are a longtime listener of this podcast, or if you recently found us through I have no idea how, thank you. You
Yeah.
know, I know that there are some of you who've been with us for years, are the incredible supporters on Patreon.
Yes.
But
Bless
also,
you.
I know I have a few friends out there who aren't financial supporter people of us, but who occasionally will send me comments and things, and or who just let me know that they listen. And
Yeah.
I appreciate all of you, because any time in this life that you make art and then you put it out, especially putting it out on the internet, it just feels like you have spent all this effort to craft something and then you're just throwing it down a hole.
Yep.
And
Yep.
every single reach out that we get from literally anyone means the world to us.
It really, really does. And it means so much. And I do this with other podcasts that I listen to as well. I know it's easy. You just listen to the thing and you enjoy it or don't enjoy it. And sometimes you talk back to the hosts while you're listening to it and alone in your house. Just me. But you don't always necessarily think to say that to the hosts or to message them and say, this is really funny, or, oh my gosh, I love this bit, or something. And I think there's an inclination to assume, which may be true with some podcasts with very popular hosts or big fan bases. You assume, like, they hear that a lot. They don't need to hear that from me. But just a reminder that everybody likes hearing that. And for smaller podcasts, they may not hear it at all or very often. So not just us, I'm not just saying, hello, please clap. I'm saying, any of the podcasts you listen to, maybe send them a message and say, dude, that last episode was really good. I really liked it. I laughed so hard. But also, please do reach out to us and let us know if you have aspects of the podcast that you really love, that you don't want us to lose in the future going forward. I mean, that would really be very useful information. Like, we kind of are going on the operation that the thing that hooks people about our podcast is the two of us and our rapport and our kind of thoughts and ideas and expressions of and how we talk to each other. And a little bit of our commentary on pop culture or whatever. But not necessarily the two people listening to watching a show and then talking about it, or any other. There may be some aspect of the show I don't even realize is a distinct aspect of it, but it's your favorite thing about the show. So shoot us a message anywhere and let us know if there's a thing that you're like, okay, but whatever you guys do, please don't lose this thing. Please still use that echo effect on Strangely's voice on the segment titles, because that's my favorite part of the show. I don't know. Something that we might not even think of as being a unique thing about our show that it turns out it's your favorite thing could exist. So let us know that so that we know to maybe keep it in the future. I don't know.
It's like there's someone who's just here for our bumpers.
Yeah. Like hitting the 30-second forward button until it's like, oh yeah, here we go.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Oh, I love that one. So good. They should make a clip reel just for that person that's like all of our outtake versions of that we say in the recording session where we like mumble it, but I'll put the echo effect on all of them.
Oh my god.
The ones where one of us is going like, hey, that guy, or something. We say it in a silly voice because we're, getting the yayas out during a recording session.
I
have saved some of them that were really funny.
We have had some good times.
Yeah.
And we will have many more.
Yes, we will.
Now, obviously, all of the Pilot House socials and things will stay active, Sarah, but what is going to happen with the Patreon going forward? We talked about that a little bit. I feel like we should announce that and just let folks know here.
So with the release of this episode, the Patreon will go from monthly to per thing, which means that if you are a patron, you will not be charged then unless we release something. So if we if we manage to actually record something while Strangers in Norway, for example, and we release it, whatever month we release it, then you'll be charged that month. So you will stop being charged monthly as soon as season 5 is over, since we do not know if/when the next time we'll get to release the thing. So yeah, but the Patreon will continue to exist, and if we do release stuff in the future, we'll still be there, and we might once we've actually gotten the season edited and out and done, I'm gonna go through our collection of outtakes and things that there have been things over the years that we clipped out because we meant, okay, that's not going to be in the episode, but it's kind of funny and I'm going to save it for posterity. I've got a whole folder of that kind of stuff, and some of it is one of us saying one word, and some of it's like a 5-minute bit. So I might, and some of those have already gone up on the Patreon, but sometimes I intend to post something on the Patreon, and then I forget. So keep your eyes on the Patreon. I will be posting some of that stuff, I think, while Strangely is away to, kind of remind you guys how great Pilot House was.
Did we ever release the awkward, we're going to have drinks and be fun attempt at talking about The Wire?
No, because we don't know where it is. Remember?
Oh, that's right.
We always posted, when we first started the Patreon, we were like, once we get to this level of this many patrons or whatever, we'll release the lost episode of The Wire, which was the first episode we ever recorded and is like hectic and mildly tedious. But we always intended to do that, but then we set the goal too high and we never got there. And then one day I asked you, hey, do you have that original audio file? And you weren't sure where it was. And it's not my computer because that was when we were still recording at your house. So we don't know where that is. It probably still exists, but as long as we don't know what hard drive it's on, it's Schrodinger's podcast episode.
I think I might have lent the thumb drive that has it to Jimmy Hoffa.
But yeah, so if we ever find
that should go out to the Patreon people.
If we ever find it, I will attempt to listen to it and see if it's as bad as I remember, or maybe better, maybe worse, and we'll see.
Well, in the meantime, Sarah, where can people follow along, find, and support you solo specifically?
No, well, sarahshay.com is my website and has all of the things, but I mean, I tweet pretty regularly, and I very irregularly stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/thesarahshay. Just originals and covers and take requests and all that. That is like a once every couple of months kind of thing. Am I doing anything else with my life right now?
You have a solo Patreon, yes?
Yes, I do. Yeah, patreon.com/sarahshay. Should have made all of my things the same username. I think that's all the plugs I have to plug. Do I have anything else? Am I doing anything else?
I think you covered the main
That's depressing. I feel like I should have something else on the hob right now, but life's complicated. So.
Well, we did have some off mic chats about some secret projects you've been mulling, and
true.
Folks should stay tuned for future announcements.
That's true. That might just be a Herringbone Audio Presents, though. So
exactly.
It'll be in the feed if that little project comes to fruition. So little tease for you there. Just think. Do you like Sarah Shay? Do you like movies? Do you like podcasts? Do you like weird stuff?
We like the weird stuff.
Stay subscribed to this feed. There's your little teaser. All right. So, Strangely, where can people find out more about your way more exciting adventures in Norway?
Well, I have a podcast called Strangely and Friends, the podcast, which is currently updating very irregularly because of my travel and internet access schedule. But at least twice a month, I am releasing episodes of the audiobook I made of Moby Dick. So if you just look
because that's the kind of weirdo you are.
Because that's the kind of weirdo I am.
That's the kind of weird shit you're into.
If you want to help support me as I continue to travel the world and collect stories and work on art, you can subscribe to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangely. I should have
Strangely
had
or Strangely and Friends. See,
this is patreon.com/strangely.
Okay.
Strangelyandfriends.com is just my website.
Okay.
My podcast feed is generally where I'm putting most of my creative output into, except for occasionally I'll have a Kickstarter and I'll sell some zines or things like that. But yeah, just sort of keep your eyes on those two spaces, my solo podcast feed and my Patreon and my website. I guess that's 3 spaces. I have kind of pulled away from social media for, I think, mental health reasons that don't really need to be explained to anyone who has spent any time on social media. But also, between my time in the Arctic recently and my upcoming time at the school, my internet access is just so sporadic that sort of keeping up a presence in places like that is more difficult.
Yeah. Plus, you're gonna be busy.
I'm
Learning
gonna
to
be
make boats.
so busy building gonna build boats. I want to build boats, not walls, and bridges just get in the way of boats.
Yeah.
On that note, it is so hot in here.
Yeah, it's so July in here. Can we go get Dix one last time, old pal?
Let's go get Dix one more time on this day.
All right. I think we have to do it.
We have to do it.
On that note, bye!
Thanks for listening to Pilot House. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Pilot House Pod. Visit our website, pilothousepodcast.com, or email us at pilothousepodcast@gmail.com to suggest future topics.
Please share this episode with a friend or rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps people find us.
Our podcast is entirely listener supported.
So thanks to our special guest stars, Cynthia, Tina, Juniper, and Jerry.
Visit patreon.com/pilothouse to find out how you can become a series regular.
Pilot House is a Herringbone Society production.
Ooh, here's a fun fact that I think people don't know.
Oh, what's that?
The theme music is called Hell's Hold Music. That's the title of that piece. Strangely composed it and recorded it. Right? It's Hell's Hold Music.
Hell's Hold Music, yeah.
Yeah. And when we at some point in this, I think the beginning of this season, we re-edited it slightly to make it a little bit different, and that one is titled on my computer as Fresh Hell. Yeah, you like that? You like
Fantastic.
that? All right, post credits stinger done.